Hello and welcome to Book Reviews by S.C. Sherman, or Steve, or Sherm, or whatever you want to call me. Tonight we are reviewing a book, Josey Wales, like the movie. Most of you heard the movie, seen the movie, by Clint Eastwood. One of the best westerns ever made. It's just amazing. Watched it 1,000 times, memorized the lines, learned how to draw the way Josey could draw. But anyway, I'd never read the book and looked into it and found out there were two books written by a guy named Forrest Carter. So you can get them all in one. This is both books here. The first book, which is the movie, is called Gone to Texas. It's about 200 pages of the book. The first part, it's kind of fun. It's dedicated to Ten Bears. So if you've seen the movie, you know all this stuff already. Ten Bears was the leader of the Comanches in the movie and had a big part. And then the second part, the second piece of the book is called The Vengeance Trail of Josey Wales. And so the first part, Gone to Texas, the first 200 pages, if you've seen the movie, it's the book exactly. I mean, you could, if you were an author that wrote a book and that was the movie they made out of your book, you'd be happy because it's word for word. Like the lines that Clint Eastwood said were almost verbatim the lines in the book. I almost thought they wrote the book after the movie because it was so close. There were just a couple things that were changed that made me realize that it wasn't, because like one of the main bad guys, Captain Redlegs Terrell, he's not in the book hardly at all, or at all. And the Fletcher character is different. They kind of cleaned that up so it'd be easier in the movie. Then the second part, The Vengeance Trail of Josey Wales, is the sequel, and it's another 200-page story, another vengeance story. Everything's a vengeance story with Josey. He's an outlaw from Missouri after the Civil War days, and it's just very violent cowboy type thing. But it was really good as well. I mean, it was just the same drama as the first book. Actually, better for me to read because the first book was actually a little boring because it was literally so like the movie. There was nothing surprising. But the second one was brand new to me, and so that was pretty fun and interesting to see another saga of Josey Wales, like what happened next after the end of the movie. They don't show you that, how he ended up on the ranch with the girl and grandma and everybody, and then what happens next is the next one, and it's pretty brutal. It's more brutal than Gone to Texas, which is what the movie is. Much more violent. It's sexually R-rated in a violent way, but then also just as much shooting violence that's in the first one. So it's a good book, but it's just crazy violent, and so then I got done. I was like, great, this is kind of cool. I'll do a little book review on this, and I would suggest getting them both and reading it because it just comes in this one book. It's nice 2-for-1 thing, and you can read it. And if you love the movie, you'll love that. And so I did a little research into the author just to figure out who this guy was, because he was kind of a one-hit wonder as far as I knew, the Josey Wales book. Turns out he wrote more like 3 or 4 novels, or not all novels. One was, I think, was a biography, but three novels, the two Josey Wales ones, and I think one other one. His name is Forrest Carter, but that's where the mystery begins with Forrest. Oh my goodness. Yeah, so Forrest began his life as Asa Carter, and then was kind of a whole different sort of fella than he put himself forward as Forrest. Just a quick rundown of Asa. This didn't get discovered till after the movies. In 1925, he was born in Alabama, roughly, and then he was in the Navy, World War II, got married when he got out of there, about 1950, he ended up with 4 kids in Alabama. Turns out he was a huge racist, huge segregationist. Basically started his own KKK group, which was kind of interesting. Incredibly violent one. He was the group that actually attacked Nat King Cole on the stage in Birmingham. His group did that. His group was credited with just horrific lynching style stuff, shootings. And then eventually he kind of calmed down from that, and he became George Wallace's speechwriter, who was the Democrat governor of Alabama. And he gave one of the most famous speeches ever, the segregationist speech. He very much against, Martin Luther King and everything that was going on in the country then. His slogan, segregation now, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever, is is credited to Asa Carter, the speechwriter. It's kind of funny too. Then George Wallace distanced himself from Asa, or Ace, they called him, as he kind of tried to mellow out as he saw the writing on the wall, and that didn't go very well with Carter, because he felt betrayed by Wallace, and he felt like he was down for the white cause, and Wallace was kind of softening as he was trying to run for president. This would have been about 1960s, and when Wallace ran. So then he cut ties with him, claimed he never even knew him. Wallace did. He said, I don't even know that guy. They were paying him kind of sideways through like surrogates. He never was on the Wallace payroll, so there's debate that he was even there. It's kind of interesting to read up on that. But so then in 1970, Asa Carter was so mad at Wallace that Wallace ran for governor of Alabama again, and Asa Carter primaried him as a Democrat, but he ran as a white nationalist, was his ticket. And kind of good to say that it didn't go over well even then. He only got 1% of the vote and did not win, dropped out of the race, and that was his end of politics. I think George Wallace did go on to win that primary, and I'm not sure if he won governor or not, but that was 1970, the year that yours truly was born. So that all happened before I came on the scene. So then after his terrible defeat, his political defeat, he's still an angry, racist, segregationist, but that's not as cool as it used to be. In the 70s, it was kind of losing favor, thank goodness. So he moves to Abilene, Texas, and tries to leave all that behind by changing his name to Forrest Carter. He even started calling his own sons his nephews, created a whole new identity for himself as Forrest Carter, and no longer this Asa Carter. And he spent all of his time basically in the library or the bar, and wrote the two books that kind of made him famous, the Josey Wales stories. And those stories are, post Civil War Southern stories. He had a lot of knowledge on history. He had a pretty interesting, fun way to write. But you could kind of tell. But I mean, I wrote it off as just the character, not necessarily the author, because you can separate those two. Because I did notice he really hates like General Sherman, which I picked up on that because I'm a big fan of General Sherman since he's an ancestor. Sherman and Sheridan, he has 2 or 3 different references to they both should be rotting in hell. And I thought that was kind of interesting. So he's got a little angst, but that was Civil War times. So that was the Southern guys that did hate those Northern generals. But so it was, sorry, dog, no barking. Anyway, a little interruption there. So that's kind of where that ended with the whole book thing. So he gets famous he just randomly sends his book to Clint Eastwood, and Clint Eastwood's partner reads the book, falls in love with it, buys it. And this is 1975. I think the first one came out in 72. They re-released it in 75 with his second one as a 2-part set. And then the Eastwood group falls in love with it and decides to make it into a movie. And so by 1976, the Outlaw Josey Wales movie, I believe, came out. So it's an instant hit. They hadn't had a money-making Western in forever. And this one made money and was a great movie. Everyone loved it. Eastwood and so forth only knew Forrest Carter as this author. They didn't know of his dark past as Ace or Asa Carter. But then he went on the Barbara Walters show. He was on the Today Show. He was doing the rounds. The New York Times did a little expose and discovered his deep, dark past and did a whole thing on who Asa Carter was. And he was actually Forrest Carter. And so from there on, his kind of star was sinking. As everyone found out, he was a huge, violent KKK racist. The Eastwoods and them were going to make the second book into a movie as well. The following year, I think it was actually slated. In one account I read, it even got filmed. But after the whole stuff about Forrest Carter being Asa Carter, that movie got scrapped. They didn't want to be anywhere near him either, or have anything to do with him. And how he renamed himself Forrest is kind of fun and interesting. The general from the South, Nathan Bedford Forrest. Yeah, that's where he got the name. Nathan Bedford Forrest was a Southern general who founded the KKK. That's who he changed his name to as his alias. So that kind of gives you a little glimpse into Forrest Carter's psyche. Um, he ended up dying in 1979 after a fist fight with his son. He had a heart attack and died. So he would have been about mid 50s by then. Pretty young guy, but he was a pretty hard drinker and a hard fighter and a hard, angry human being. Isn't it all I can tell? So if you can separate the man from the book, it's worth reading. If you like the Josey Wales movie, you're going to like the book, and you'll like the second part of the book. Is a totally interesting story that will never be made into a movie, but it's worth the short read. So there's your book review for the evening. Sherm's book review of The Outlaw Josey Wales, also known as Gone to Texas. And the second one is called The Vengeance Trail of Josey Wales. That one's kind of fun too. It ends up with some of the Apache Indians as well. It goes clear into Old Mexico and ends up with the Apaches being in a pretty large band of Indians led by Geronimo, which Geronimo was a guerrilla fighter too. And it's kind of interesting. He writes very favorably of the Indians and how great fighters they were and all about them. But it's pretty graphic as far as, but it's honest as far as the history that I've read. So it's just interesting to read this book in light of who he was. But I know you can write characters that are not like you. I've written plenty of characters that are not like me at all. So, but it's interesting. This guy was, by all accounts, a pretty horrible human being, and wrote one of the most wonderful westerns that we've had. So there you go. That's my review of Josey Wales by Forrest Carter, or Asa Carter. May he not rest in peace, the evil human being. But it's a good story either way. And over and out.